Welcome back, everyone. I am the Depressed Dior, and this is Middara, Unessential Malum Act 1. Alright, so before we begin, we're going to go ahead and go over these characters that we picked up. We'll start with Remy. So I didn't read any of the flavor text, but I'll go ahead and do so now. We got Remy Shady Past has given her insight, which is Shady Training. Avian Flight is Remy is gifted with feathered wings that allow her to fly. As for any of the flavor text, we got the Vitality Juice Box, which is a glass bottle, is actually a terrible idea. Throwing Knives, which is just like a real ninja. Let's go ahead and reveal the back of her card. Daughter of the Black Hands. The Moretti family has a dark reputation. Together with the help of Grace Young, governor of Ramstead, Malik Moretti established Alenia's most notorious criminal organization, the Black Hand. Specializing in information brokering for the aristocrats of Alenia, the group was tolerated by those in charge. With Grace's support, Malik transformed the small village of Ramstead into a bustling trade center. It came as a surprise to everyone when the ruthless and cruel Malik Moretti had a daughter arrive on Middara. The girl was harbinged from Earth through private services, circumventing the country's long wait list to have children. Many saw this as an attempt to keep the child secret, so the family's business wouldn't bring unwanted consequences for the girl. Remy's upbringing on Earth was one of hardship, something Malik had orchestrated to help build character. When she arrived, Malik quickly realized that she wasn't like him. She was timid, but also kind and eager to help others. Malik embraced this and tried his hardest to keep her away from the Black Hand affairs. She wasn't the heir he planned for, but she was something more than that to him now. He loved her dearly for her innocence. Remy arrived after the start of the Institute of Alenia's school year, and so she was able to enjoy Ramstead for nearly a year before being sent off to earn her citizenship. This time allowed her to pick up some skills from her father's friends, like lockpicking, sneaking, and subterfuge. She may have been kind-hearted, but she had a mischievous streak. Adjusting to life on Middara was hard at first, especially her advancement. It was terribly painful, but left her with wings which she learned to use with great enthusiasm. Even so, the loss of her Earth family weighed heavily on her. She had been told by Malik that they worked for him and she'd see them again, but this didn't make her miss them any less. So, some references that were kind of mentioned. There's the Harbingers. Harbingers are essentially people on Earth that their job is to try to get people that are going to be future Middaran citizens to Middara. There are things on Earth that do not like Middaran people at all. Any people that are from Middara, that come back from Middara, their transformations stay. So obviously, showing up with wings can draw a lot of attention. But there are things called angels, which have a complete and total hatred for any people from Middara for some reason. I don't know the details as far as that's concerned. One thing to note about any people on Middara, any humans that come to Middara, is they stop aging. So while it's great that you're essentially ageless and you won't die from old age, it does mean that whatever you come in as, that it means you don't really change unless you go back to Earth. If you go back to Earth, your aging resumes from where it left off. The other thing to note, of course, is since aging is impossible for humans when they're on Middara, that means childbirth is generally not possible either. So the way that they have to get new population is to either grab a person from Middara, or not Middara, but from Earth, or they have people from Middara go to Earth and then have a child, and then once the child is old enough, they will have them taken back to Middara, in which case, depending on what country you go into, in which case this is Alenia, you will go through some education for 2 years to get familiar with Middara, because obviously every Middaran citizen is actually pretty important because they are ageless and it's very difficult to get more people in. Speaking of, the only way to get more people in is by way of portals, and there's only so many portals available. I don't remember where the portal is for this one. I think it goes to Manhattan, but I don't remember. I know there's also one in China, but I don't. Other than that, I don't know too much about the portals. There is a bunch of lore on the Succubus Publishing website. There's also a Succubus Publishing YouTube channel that also has someone that actually kind of goes over the general details as well. Also, the story mode does kind of tap on each of these things, so it is what it is. Anyway, so that's Remy. Zeke over here, his nimble fighter is Zeke's cautious nature helps him to adapt to any situation. So from what Remy mentioned, her transformation was very painful because essentially wings sprout out from her back. Zeke, I think he has pointed ears, but other than that, I don't think he actually had very much of a transformation. All right, the auspicious heir. The illustrious Zhang House of Alenia has done a much better job at producing long-living offspring than their friends the Arsons. While the Arson family had given birth to multiple healthy children, most either left the kingdom, died, or disappointed their father enough to be ruled out as successors to the throne. As a diarchy, the kingdom of Alenia needed to unify both the Zhang and Arson houses through blood. Zeke and his cousin Tyrael were both conceived with the intent of merging these powerful households. While his cousin had been born 16 years earlier, the family didn't want to take any chances. A second child was a way of hedging their bets, with both births timed alongside an Arson child. Shortly before his death, the powerful and revered Lo Zhang and his queen Ida gave birth to Zeke. This made Zeke the first and only child of Lo Zhang, and what many in Alenia see as the true heir to the Zhang family's title. This has made him the center of attention among the ruling class. Zeke's earth life was supposed to be one of rigid rules and education, but thanks to a nearly senile foster parent, Zeke got none of those things. Shortly after his arrival in Middara, Ida found that her son was disobedient, lacked etiquette, and was a nuisance in his classes. A magical world was supposed to be full of adventure, but instead Zeke found himself bombarded with all the things he hated most: responsibility, expectations, and rules. While he was told about his arranged marriage with Nightingale Arson, deep down he knew it would never happen. The two had a great friendship, but she was like a sister. Even so, he could tell his birth mother truly loved him, so Zeke aspired to become, if not a perfect heir, at least an acceptable son. So, yeah, Zeke is actually a prince, but he's a prince of essentially the non-ruling family of Alenia. Speaking of the ruling family of Alenia, we've got Nightingale Arson. Her ambitious flavor text is Nightingale's commanding personality makes her a natural leader. Also, the flavor text for MF Fortitude is "This ain't just fortitude, it's also beer." Alright, second Princess of Alenia. Nightingale was groomed for her role as a princess. The motel where she worked, the high school she attended, and even her foster parents were specifically chosen to produce the kind of child the Arson family wanted. However, the nature of raising children vicariously through the Harbinger program is prone to ruin even the most carefully laid plans. When Nightingale entered junior high school, she met a fellow student named Khufu Taiga. The two quickly became close friends and began doing everything together. This relationship blossomed throughout her high school years. When Nightingale was finally pulled into Middara shortly after graduation, Khufu followed the Harbingers assigned to retrieve her, and he was able to find his way into Middara. These events didn't bode well for the Arson family. Her Middaran parents, Balthazar and Kezia, had intended Nightingale's arrival to coincide with that of the Zhang's son, Zeke. Afraid that Khufu's familiarity with her daughter might threaten the relationship with Zeke they hoped for, Balthazar and Khufu moved to Tima. Balthazar had Khufu moved to Tima to become a part of the Demiurge program. This move allowed Balthazar to keep Khufu away while still honoring Nightingale's request that he be allowed to stay in her life. To the Arson's disappointment, their daughter was anything but regal. She was crass, loud, and rambunctious. She scored high in all her classes, but got into trouble often and drove many of the teachers crazy. Despite this, she was personable and admired by her classmates. What made her father furious was her desire to join the Demiurge, Alenia's special ops team. Balthazar's son, Dominique, had already died in their service. He wasn't going to let his family suffer that kind of loss again. Alright, so Princess Nightingale. I think she's like third in line of the throne. She's second princess, but I believe there's a prince that's older than her. Alright, Rook. His thing is Rook's advancement granted him an unearthly amount of stamina and strength and manliness. Keywords, the flavor text for Magic Bomb is like the stuff on Earth, but it works. And then the Hyper Energy HP Potion is, it has 752 milligrams of caffeine. All the better. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look at the back here. Prodigious student. Occasionally, the Institute of Alenia finds itself a brilliant student of great skill. It's not unusual that these students are recruited by the elite for purposes that require the most talented men and women. Rook never would have considered himself one of these chosen few. While his grades were good, he never understood why the Zhang family chose him to tutor their youngest son, Zeke. The two became fast friends despite their very different personalities. Unbeknownst to Rook, his good fortune wasn't a coincidence. Rook was identified early as an individual that excelled in both intellect and loyalty. For the aristocrats of Alenia, personality is more important than simple talent. Rook's selfless nature and level head made him a potential asset to the royal family, and the Institute could see it. Despite their close eye on his progress, Rook had a secret. Shortly after his arrival on Middara, Rook explored some ruins near his family's rural farming homestead. There he found an amulet left behind by an ancient civilization that once inhabited Alenia. Excited that his family might be able to use the gold that the amulet might fetch, Rook made his way back home to share the good news. As he traveled, something strange happened. The amulet began to glow, and a spectral girl appeared in the air before him. She said her name was Suri, and explained that the artifact connected her to their world. She warned that her world, Arkala, was forbidden from interacting with Middara, and asked that he keep the amulet a secret. Despite the dangers, Suri was curious about Middara and Rook, and they soon became friends. Since his first encounter with Suri, Rook has kept her in the true nature of the amulet a secret. Their bond grew over the years he spent at the Institute, and they learned from each other's strange lives. So there you go. Not only is he manly, he also got a girl. Okie dokie. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into the story mode. So here we got Chapter 1 of Unintentional Malum Act 1. And kind of at the beginning of the book, it does kind of go over some of the details. There is a lot of story. There are audio files that some people don't like, but I don't have any issues with them. There's also Spark Notes, which are essentially abbreviated forms of all the story bits. So if you happen to just want to get through things quickly, you can just read the bullet points that are here. I will be reading through everything. So like I said, I'll probably keep the big story bits as their own video. That way, if you do want to just focus purely on encounters, you can. That being said, the encounters will have some reading in them, especially if it involves any new monsters or new equipment. All right. So, besides that, just giving you some general information about like the headings. As you can see, they're color-coded, which can be kind of helpful. Diagrams are also used in this book, which are essentially just a section that will go over like setting up things. So, for example, this is the diagram book, and if it tells you to set up something like this, you're supposed to grab those tools and do so. This module does have some scripting that kind of do some of that for you, which is very helpful. So I'll be using that whenever I can. All right. Besides that, it's just talking about general things about doing encounters. There are win and lose conditions. Losing in this game does not necessarily mean game over. That being said, there are story game overs in this game, and if you hit a game over state, that is the end of your adventure. Usually that means you have to start over, though some people may rewind and just redo that encounter. All right. So let's go ahead and begin. Before the mast. Nightingale crept along silently through the crowd, eyes fixed on her target. There were at least 100 of her fellow students there, thronging about and chatting excitedly in their teams of 4. Her victim wasn't watching anything but the cigarette in his fingers. He didn't stand a chance. Air rushed around Nightingale as she jumped and latched onto Zeke's back with both arms. "Zeke!" Her voice came out somewhere between a squeal and a screech, loud enough that a few nearby students turned to stare. Her friend grunted and spluttered, the cigarette tumbling away from his mouth. "You trying to kill me?" Nightingale dropped to the ground behind him. "You don't need my help for that." She extinguished the still smoldering cigarette with a well-placed step. 2 years away from Earth, and you're still poisoning yourself. Zeke only grinned in response. "It also makes you smell terrible," someone said from behind them. They both turned, and Nightingale's eyes widened when they saw her sister, Shayless, standing there. Nightingale was usually thrilled to see her, but today was different. Today, Shayless was one of the proctors on the most important test of their new lives, the Magical Aptitude and Skill Test, or the MAST for short. Makes me smell terrible," Zeke scoffed. "See, here I was expecting something like, 'It's good to see you, Zeke,' or maybe, 'How'd you do on the written exams?' Friend stuff." "No favoritism today," Shayla said. She sounded stern, but she was grinning at them as she flipped through a few pages on a worn clipboard. "Oh, but look at that. Lucky you. Looks like you two ended up together." "What a coincidence," Nightingale muttered, rolling her eyes. "They put the royal heirs together." "Consider that your only luck you'll get today," Shayla said. Nightingale looked around, wondering who their other partners would be. Of course, she and Zeke would be in a group together. She knew why Shayla didn't want to broadcast it, though. Nightingale knew each of the students around them. The short girl with multicolored eyes, another with a pair of oversized bat wings, the kid with the strange goat-like hooves instead of feet, but none of them were actual friends. Each team has 4 people, Zeke said. Who are the other 2? Rook, Lars, and Remy Moretti. Shayla's frowned at the clipboard for a moment, then shrugged and tucked it under one arm. You need me to point them out? Nah, we're good. Zeke briefly rested one hand on Nightingale's shoulder and pointed toward the largest student in the assembly hall. I see Rook there. If you're not already, get acquainted. I've only got another few teams to assign before I explain everything. Shayla walked away, vanishing effortlessly into the crowd. Guess it makes sense. Rook's got to be the smartest student here, Zeke said. They started walking toward him, Nightingale leaving it to Zeke to clear a path for them. Nightingale lowered her voice so the other students nearby couldn't hear. Sure. Rook makes sense. Remy, though? Isn't her dad some kind of mafioso? Who thought it was a good idea to pair someone like that with royalty? Couldn't make it look like favoritism, so they give us a boat anchor to balance out our awesomeness, Zeke shrugged. Every team has 4. As long as she doesn't slow us down, we'll be fine. Rook was easily double the size of Nightingale, with his hands like hammers and a beard like a lion. Hey, Zeke, Rook called. They met with a bone-cracking embrace. Remy stood just behind him, arms folded awkwardly in front of her. She looked up, smiling politely, and extended a hand. Hey, I guess we're together for the test, Princess Nightingale Arson, ma'am. Remy peered at Nightingale through impressive multicolored dreadlocks. Her massive owl-like wings folded behind her, making Remy's small frame look a little bigger. Just Nightingale, she corrected, taking the offered hand. You're Remy, right? Yeah. Remy looked past her and up to the gigantic Rook, who was still talking with Zeke. I know I'm probably not the teammate you were hoping for. She didn't get a chance to respond because at that moment, her sister stepped onto a raised platform at the edge of the hall and shouted, All right, listen up, everyone. Welcome to the Magical Aptitude and Skill Test. If any of you have doubts about your ability to complete the mast, the door's right there. You'll be required to go through the Arquebus, the Academy's training dungeon. Don't think the bellicose cues make up for stupid mistakes, because they don't. Students have died during this test. There were a few seconds of silence. We're going to walk through the doors behind me to the armory. Each of you is entitled to 1 pack of supplies. Choose wisely. If you get halfway through the test before you realize you didn't bring something important, too bad. She paused, waiting for her statement to sink in. If you have any last questions, ask either me or another proctor before you get into the dungeon. Once the test starts, you'll only get my help if things go very wrong. She raised her voice, glancing once around the room. For the sake of your grades, you do not want our help. We won't let you die, but if any of us have to come down and save you, we won't let you pass either. There are no questions. Shayla turned and hopped off the edge of the platform. Follow me to the armory. Choose a starting pack depending on the adventure. So I've already gone over the gear. So as mentioned, you get to pick 1 starting pack. I kind of wish you were allowed to pick a starting pack. Individually, these builds are not terrible, but it's more as a group I feel like it's lacking. And it's never been adjusted even back in 1.1, or from its 1.1 days. My biggest criticism is there's not really any good ranged attacks besides your throwing knives and the gore shot, which is not very good as a starting ranged attack. And you definitely need some decent ranged attacks in the mast. For the entire story mode, one of probably the most difficult parts in this game is actually the tutorial, which is pretty funny. That being said, it being difficult is actually not that bad of a thing because it kind of gets you familiar with the idea that being defeated is not necessarily the end of the world. And if any of the things I've heard about the start of Act 2 are true, you doing perfectly is not necessarily required anymore. We'll just put it that way. Anyway, so you get all this gear, and we continue on with the rest of the story. The armory was well stocked, so none of them would go into the dungeon wanting. After selecting their gear, they made their way through a lonely hallway to a freight lift operated with pulleys and ropes. There was only enough room on the lift for the 4 of them, and no pesky safety features like rails. A burly proctor, Nightingale recognized as an archery instructor, stood just beside the lift. Someone keep a hand on the rope at all times, he warned. If you let go, the fall will kill you. Got it, Rook answered. He was the first to climb aboard, taking hold of the control rope with one gigantic fist. The rest of them followed him aboard, and they started down. This is going to be awesome. Nightingale looked down at the firefly lights of the glowstones illuminating the carved stone patterns of the dungeon below. Even if it's a trial dungeon, it's about time we got out of the classroom. Zeke nodded. I just can't wait to graduate. No more lectures, no more exams. Remy shuffled near the edge of the lift, her wings twitching a little in the slight breeze. Yeah. Shayless was waiting at the bottom of the lift in a cavernous room cut from rough stone. Several passages opened in all directions down some of the tunnels. Lights were trailing away, and voices echoed as groups set out on their separate paths. You ready, little sis? Shayless gestured down a dark hallway. That one's yours. I'm ready. Nightingale drew her weapon and raised it enthusiastically. Nothing down there stands a chance. And with that... Oh, keeps on going. I'm sure it doesn't. Shayless reached out, wrapping one arm around Nightingale in a quick hug. Shayless turned, meeting each of their eyes slowly. Take care of each other. Your team shares one grade, so your citizenship depends on it. She hopped sidelong onto the lift platform, tugging on the rope. The rickety elevator started to rise, taking her with it. Good luck. Zeke waved at her as she disappeared. He turned and headed toward the indicated pathway. His expression wilted as he got his first look of what waited for them. Damp stone, thick cobwebs, and the smell of decay. Let's get this over with. They left the first room behind, the sound of squeaking metal pulleys fading into the distance. The stone was thick, too thick to hear what any other group might be doing. Soon enough, they were left with nothing but their own footsteps and the light of their glowstones. They didn't have far to go before they reached the first of the bellicose cubes. It was a small relic, only about a foot across and set into the stone wall of the cavern. Intricate carvings of Kruor magic pulsed with red light as they neared the basin at the front. I always hate using these things, though I guess they've kept me safe in a couple of sparring matches, Remy muttered. It's better than getting killed, Rook said. The proctors put them here so that they have time to intervene if we're defeated by monsters. Just make sure to attune yourself with it. Without your blood, it won't protect you. Attuned or not, fighting will still hurt, Zeke added. I broke my arm while learning to use a sword. The guy hit me with a cheap shot. Rook nodded. Zeke's right. I've broken students' arms while teaching them to duel. Nightingale winced as she cut her hand along the blade of her weapon, just deep enough that a few drops of blood welled up in her palm. She held it over the bowl, watching the drops fall and boil away. For just a moment, she felt as though all the blood in her body was being tugged toward the cube. The sensation passed, and she got out of the way. They all took their turns before they could finally advance into the encroaching gloom. The mass day 1. All right. So speaking of an archer instructor, I wish we had a bow. All right. So we'll go ahead and read the flavor text in the beginning here. The Mass Day 1. The damp, cold air of the cave chills you to the bone. As your eyes adjust to the dark, you see the faint outline of a large rock blocking the path up ahead. It looks as if a strong push could send the boulder careening into the pits on either side of it. In any case, it looks like the only way forward. All right. Click this load page. And it loads everything. Okay. One thing I will talk about, since I am including promo cards as well as the bounties, there are things called alternates and variants. Alternates are essentially different versions of an existing monster. Or actually, sorry, they're replacements for an existing monster. Kind of like an example would be like, well, it tends to have different stats as the monster it's replacing. So, for example, if we're using D&D terms, like if there's a goblin, an alternate would be like Goblin Wizard, which would have different stats and possibly different abilities, or even a hobgoblin. Variants are essentially the same. They're generally classified as the same monster, but they tend to have different, and they tend to have the same stats, but they have different like AI attached to them, and maybe different passives. The reason why I'm mentioning this is there are alternates and variants that are going to be available in the early game. Whenever you set up an encounter, there's something called the placement phase, which is where you place any of the monsters that are, or any of the tokens and monsters that need to be placed onto the board. Any monsters that are placed during the placement phase cannot be alternates or variants. You have to place whatever it tells you to place. But if there's ever a situation where we spawn something from triggering something, for example, or revealing an area, those can become alternates and variants, which we'll definitely be seeing very soon. So, as mentioned, I'm going to go ahead and just put a break here. We kind of went over the story bits, kind of went over some of the flavor text, went over the story, the actual story, and we're finally on our first encounter. So like I said, I'm going to keep these videos separate, just so if you do want to skip through the story, you can mostly just skip to whatever these encounters are. Anyway, I'm the Depressed Viewer. This was Middara Unintentional Malum Act 1. I'll see you guys later.